This is Facepalm America. I'm Beowulf Rockland. FacepalmAmerica.com is where you can go for more information about the show, to listen to past episodes, to connect with us on social media, and any time that you want to call or message us, you can feel free to do so at 202-656-6271. And I am in arrears when it comes to reading your message. I promise the next episode I will get to that. There are several of you who have written in, and I just got to get around to it. But there are some important conversations that we need to have prior to that point. I am sitting here in beautiful, or at least what is usually beautiful, Southern Oregon, just across the border from California. And as happens so very often in the western United States now, the air is filled with smoke because of wildfires. And the state of Florida and Georgia and South Carolina are experiencing a major hurricane. And that is happening a lot more often than it used to, as are the fires that my area is experiencing. And there's more climate weirding, there is more global warming, there is more climate catastrophe, and that's on top of all the non-specifically climate-related issues that come from having a kind of global economy that we do, that come from having a very intensive industry, which in many ways is very unregulated and doesn't take care of its garbage very well. We have massive piles of garbage floating around in the oceans in some places, and we are stripping the earth of its resources and a lot of the things which make it a nice and livable place. But there's some folks who are thinking about how that might change in the context of how business and capitalism works, and that's why we're speaking today with Mark Shayler. He is the author of You Can't Make Money from a Dead Planet, which I think is an excellent title because it's absolutely true. The Sustainable Method for Driving Profits. Mark Shayler, thanks so much for being on Facepalm America with us today.
Beowulf, it's such a treat. And Oregon and California, and that border between the two is so beautiful. And the last time I was there, it was on fire as well. I was there 2-3 years ago.
Where were you? I'm curious. Were you in the Rogue Valley at all?
Do you know what? I don't know. So we drove up from San Francisco to Portland.
Right.
And we went via McKinleyville, but I don't know which bit we took. Apart from the towns, I was driving, right? And my wife was saying, don't look left. There's a really big drop. And I was like, can't look left because I'm driving.
It's filled with trees. It's beautiful. And but the thing is that nowadays, although there was a very good rainy season a few months ago, and it filled up some of the lakes more than they have been in years, we still, if you look around at some of these places, I don't know how long ago you came, but you see more and more kind of like brownish yellow trees because overall they're not getting enough water and because the temperature's getting hotter. And as a result, you get more fires because there's more dry material, and the heat just piles on that. And we know that a lot of that has to do with our contribution, and our contribution is based primarily in business and the way we go about doing business. And we've been going about it in a way which is not particularly conscious.
This is a great place to start, right? So let's just think about the redwoods for 1 minute. Okay?
Yeah.
You've got the most beautiful country, one of the most beautiful countries in the world, right?
Yeah.
And you've got all of these resources that have taken centuries to grow. And then within a really short period of time, we take them down and we turn them into money. We've got that, Karl Marx analyzed this in detail. Raw materials plus labor equals product plus profit plus waste. And that conversion, regardless of what color your politics, that conversion is real. And we've taken all of this historic growth and we've turned it into a short amount of present cash.
Yeah.
And thereby stealing from the future their resources, but more importantly, their ability to regulate the climate. Our ecosystem is so finely balanced. And as we remove these trees, as we destroy the soil through agricultural systems which are degenerative. We remove the planet's ability to regulate its own gas balance and its own temperatures, and the fires that we see. So much of this is down to the fact that there is literally no moisture in the soil and in the plants to stop them spreading. I'm not going to go into who started them, whether it was natural or not. The point is they can't be stopped because they are, as you rightly said, as dry as tinder. And so we're in a real pickle. And that one drive up that coast showed me that in really kind of like Technicolor.
Gotcha. So you drove up 101 on the coast, I guess is what you did, which is a beautiful area. You drove right through the redwoods. I mean, that's where I grew up in Northern California, and we're about a 2.5 hour drive from the redwoods, or the kind of northern extent of the redwoods. When we drive out to the coast, it comes out at Crescent City, which is kind of like about as far north as they go, and then they go down about as far south as San Luis Obispo, which is halfway between the Bay Area and Los Angeles. But I grew up with these. My family would go camping there all the time, and you experience it because you can tell that they're drier than they used to be. These are like 1,200-year-old trees, some of them. And you hear about, like, there's less fog than there used to be. And the fog is what keeps these moist and alive. And we're having a huge impact on that. So how do we start here? Because, like, given capitalism's record so far, it's not necessarily surprising that some people say it's not compatible with keeping the planet alive, and they want to just get rid of it. Do we need to go to that extent? Or are there really ways of changing it? Because, like, capitalism, especially the kind that we've seen over the past couple of decades, is super hyper-focused on profits and not very focused on people and the environment. And it seems like there are fewer and fewer bulwarks against it just rolling over everything.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Currently, capitalism is causing the problems that we see in the world, whether they be environmental or whether they be social. There's a whole load of problems, or whether they be cultural in terms of the destruction of cultural capital. But that doesn't necessarily mean that capitalism is bad. It just means that capitalism hasn't valued the right things. We've got this thing called kind of like the tragedy of the commons. These resources, and these resources can be human as well as environmental, that are not costed properly. So that will be holes in the ground for putting waste in, or that can be raw materials that grow or that are produced, whether it be iron ore, coal, we'll get onto coal later, or whether it be trees or wood, or whether it be soil. And because those things aren't costed properly, what happens is no one pays the true price for using them. And there was a study recently, it's quite a fascinating study, which looked at the kind of full cost of manufacturing. And it found that without costing, because we do not cost externalities properly, all of the world's biggest industries are profitable only because we don't cost those things properly. And if we put a price on those externalities, all of the world's biggest industries would be unprofitable. Right. This is staggering. It's to the tune of $7.3 trillion a year is our subsidy to industry. Now, there's nothing wrong with making a profit. You're not a business if you don't make a profit, and an enterprise can drive positive change. But if we're not costing things properly, then that profit is false, or it comes at the expense of the future or the marginalized.
Right.
And that's the issue.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, because really capitalism as it exists is basically kind of a big mental trick in order to, like, convince ourselves that this really isn't part of the problem. We create a system that externalizes all of that negative stuff and refuses to take it into consideration, whereas it really significantly impacts us and is impacting us more all the time. And basically what we're doing is pretending that it's not there. So what would capitalism and business look like in a system that took those things into account? And how would it be profitable? And what kinds of industries would we have to focus on in order to make that be the case?
Great question. So first off, let's think about something really specific. Let's think about the food that we eat. The food that we eat is really cheap because it's subsidized. It might not feel like that when you hand over your dollars at Trader Joe's or wherever you go, but it feels really expensive because over time we've seen this increasing costs. In real terms, food has never been as cheap as it is now. I've benchmarked this across the previous 4 decades. Food is crazy cheap, and it's subsidized because of the way that we subsidize the petrochemical industry, we subsidize the industries that produce all of the chemicals that we place on our products.
Fertilizers and et cetera, especially. And transportation of the food, of course, also.
All of that. Now, if we didn't do that, things would become more expensive. Now, is that a problem? Right? I'm not going to romanticize poverty. If you've got no money, life is miserable, right? And that's a whole other kind of conversation. But we are calorie rich and nutrition deficit. So the food that we eat is nowhere near as nutritious as it used to be. A tomato grown in 1935, to get the same level of lycopene, the same level of nutritional benefit from one tomato grown in the 30s, we'd need to eat 10 tomatoes today.
Right.
So we've damaged our nutrition, and yet there's a rising issue with obesity, and most importantly, this whole issue of metabolical health. The way that we're aging, really high levels of diabetes, gout, all of these blood sugar type illnesses are to do with the type of food that we eat. So just looking at one sector there, prices are going to rise. We're going to have to eat less.
Yeah.
Not always a problem unless you're really poor. I appreciate that if you've got no food, life's miserable, right? So that's one sector.
Yeah, and just to pause for a moment, I mean, there are other structural things about capitalism that deliberately keep people's wages low. So if it's possible to tweak, and I don't know if I'm completely convinced that it is. I guess I'm hopeful that it is. But if it is possible to tweak, then there are going to be a lot of other things going on besides just raising the prices of food. We're also going to have to structure things in a way that people actually get more resources that are distributed more equitably, so that they can purchase the things that they need, be it food or shelter or what have you.
For absolute certain. And there's some fascinating work done in Detroit by a friend of mine, Davita Davison, who changed the food growing. Her whole mission was to tackle the fact that her city was the poster child for urban decay. And so she started with the food that we eat. She changed the way that people grew food so that everybody had access to the ability to grow food, and everybody had cheaper, better nutrition. Type 2 diabetes reversed in literally all the cases that she worked on. Wow. And people ate a more varied, amazing diet. And this is anti-capitalist in a way, right? Because what she did is she broke the link between food deserts and this culture and these estates. I think you call them projects.
Right, exactly.
And so she was able to say, so yes, this is a different model, and it might be more expensive if you're buying it from the store, but you're growing it in your garden. And therefore it's significantly cheaper. So at this point, we're beginning to say the means of production belongs to us. And this is tinkering at the very heart of capitalism.
Yeah, it is, because people owning the means of production doesn't sound much like capitalism to me. It sounds like a different system. I'm trying to remember the name of it.
Let's not go there because we'll automatically get people dropping off this. But there is a mixed economy where the means of production can be owned by the people for the things that they can